Hi everyone, delonewolf here, and welcome back for some more EVE Online. Welcome also to Dodixie, the Gallente trade hub in EVE Online. This video is a little bit of a request, but I think it's pretty interesting. I always do try to wrap my head around the amazing sandbox economy in EVE Online. And someone requested I take a look at the market in Dodixie, and specifically we are going to also try and see how this market is reacting to the planned changes to industry that are, well, I think driving a lot of speculation and also a big rush, as I've said, to get production done now on the current settings so that for bigger ships you can still have some of the cheaper ones before they change to more expensive requirements for all of those ships. So let's get started. As always, I think the minerals will be pretty interesting, so I'm going to close everything. Then we'll go to the quick bar and we will start with the minerals. Now, before we get going, of course, one quick note: Dodixie is a much smaller market than Jita and NMR, so there should be some different dynamics because of that. But let's get started. Here is the chart for titanium. And these average prices did not reach 7 ISK, so we definitely have a lower price range, I would say, for titanium. High point's also 9, it's 10 ISK in Jita, so we're basically moving here at a lower range of about, a couple of ISK, I think, most of the time. Demand seems to be pretty low here as well. Let's take a quick look like this. We also have an I Choose You market here, where they're willing to pay 5.8 ISK. That's a lot cheaper than in the Jita region. And then sellers, a very aggressive seller with 1,000 units coming in at 580, but it's 670, 675 for most sellers with some volumes, and they're noticeably smaller than Jita and NMR, which is of course to be expected for a smaller market. So we still have that recovery, but it's definitely limited, and it looks to me like titanium is less available, but also a little bit cheaper than in Jita. Next up, we've got pyrite, and here we also have a pretty big breakout up to 40 ISK. And then here, I think this is going to be a little bit more interesting. Sellers are at, well, most of them at almost 35 ISK compared to the 30-ish, I think. Well, I think we're actually just below 30 in Jita at the moment, and 27.08 for the buyers. So a little bit more action happening here when it comes to the number of sell orders, and the number of buy orders actually quite high. So a big focus on pyrite apparently, and a premium for pyrite in the Gallente space region. That's pretty cool. Next up here, we've got Megasite with the moonshot happening here as well, pushing us right above 175. And sellers, well, there's one at 177, but let's go for most of these. I'm going to assume that this will be absorbed pretty quickly. 224 for the sellers of Megasite, also in my opinion very, very expensive, more expensive by just a little bit than in Jita, and 157.50 for those buyers, another big margin. We saw this pattern happening in Amar as well, and so in all likeliness, one of the drivers of this big margin is indeed going to be this buyout that happened from big industrialists, big groups, because, well, they're rushing into grabbing as much as they can so that they can still build some Titans, some carriers, some super carriers, maybe even battleships with the current mineral requirements, rather than having to do the more expensive and more complex task of building them after the industry changes will hit. So there is this big buyout that's happening, and that's of course exemplified by these volumes that are way above average for most of the days in the last almost 2 weeks at this point. So another big price response here. Next up, we've got the isogen market that also has these volumes, so that buyout is clearly happening. We're well above average for isogen as well. We are selling for 68 for the sellers, 45 for the buyers. Decent margin between these two, and I would say, I mean, this is just off the top of my head, this is pretty close, I think, to the Jita prices. So once you go into the low SIC region, that's apparently what's happening. Let's take a look at Noxium. That one is just straight up for a full year. The biggest winner for I would say all of the changes that CCP has done does seem to be Noxium. It was super inexpensive at the beginning of this cycle, I would say. Below 500 disc is very, very inexpensive. 1000 disc, I would say, is definitely a more normal price, and even a little bit above that for Noxium, historically speaking. But then you can see that with the mineral changes at first, like the drought, and then some nerfs to the Rorcal, we started to go up, and then we had a big change here with the rebalancing, making Noxium like exclusive to low sec, so that went us up to 1500, but it's just not stopping now. Noxium needs are still pretty high. It was a high sec mineral. You could mine this in high sec, and so as a result now it's super expensive. We are looking at almost 2300 disc for the sellers of Noxium. Availability very, very low. You can clearly see that this is a smaller market, and then buyers being forced up to 1850 if you want to have some Noxium for your own production from Gallente space. Within Gallente space you are going to pay a very hefty price for that. Then our nullsec minerals here is Zydrine. That's recovering quite quickly, spiked up to 2500 disc. I would say another higher spike than in Jita, but a pretty quick recovery back down to 2000 for the sellers and less than 1500 for the buyers. That's in range of the current Jita prices. And then we get Megasite 600-ish. Ooh, that's interesting as well. I would say 775 for the sellers, 630 for the buyers. That's a big premium compared to the 600 disc average that you're getting in Jita. Maybe 660, 650, something like that, but you're definitely getting a nice premium here. And so this smaller market also comes with some supply constraints, although the availability is not that bad. But yeah, opportunity does lie here with selling some minerals at a nice premium over the Jita prices. That's definitely pretty cool to see. We'll touch on Morphite, although I don't think we can expect too much here. You can see this is basically a chart that's continuing after its incredible valorization up to the 75,000 ISK range, and now we're in the normal market transaction. So this doesn't really count as part of preparations for the industry changes. But yeah, one seller at 75,000 and then next 82,000. So another premium on the Jita prices, and then buyers, 57,000. That's another very big margin, showing that in all likeliness the theory that I heard on the live stream that CCP did about the industry changes is definitely true. There's also just too much Morphite needed in the general Tech 2 production cycle, you could say, of everything to keep prices lower. And there is this massive buyout of anything that becomes available. That does happen very aggressively in Morphite. And yeah, we just got into this smaller cycle where the same thing happens for the other minerals. So except for titanium, which I would honestly say that this little jump is also a bit of a bubble, because general titanium use should go down after the industry changes. We're actually seeing a slight upwards premium for the sellers of these minerals in the Dodixie market, creating another small opportunity, right? If you can supply the stuff, then you can definitely get a nice price for it, especially if you can go into low-sec, if you can go into null-sec for your Noxium. Yeah, Noxium is just crazy, but also your Zydrine and even your Megasite. You're probably better off moving it here than moving it to Jita. So that's definitely an interesting start. Let's take a quick look at some of these battleships, then those that we should expect to have a bit of an impact from all of the upcoming changes. That's what you're seeing here. Everyone just rushed in, bought whatever was not nailed down to the ground, and pushed the price up from, let's see, what was it be 275 to 80 range, up to 350 to 400. So that's definitely a big jump here, because everyone is expecting these battleships to become more expensive, and man, that's a big price. Abaddon, 447 million ISK. Availability, I mean, there's like a dozen. Again, this is the smaller market. Demand is quite lower as well. Look at that big premium between sellers and buyers. But this is, I think, the highest price we've seen for the Abaddon, both from Jita and from Amar. Definitely quite a bit lower than this. Then we've got the Apocalypse, 420 million at the moment as well. Just went straight up here. Look at the lack of availability. So this volume, this purchase of like 10 Apocalypses, just put the put the market in its new range, and then we are a lot higher. And then the Armageddon, a little bit more popular, I think, so about 20 of those being bought, and that one is actually already being brought back down, but it's still almost 400 million for the sellers, 265 for the buyers. I don't think we should go over all of these, but the local ones, let's take a look at the Dominix. Now this is actually one that I'm trying to sell at the moment. Here is the Dominix chart, 350 on the market chart, and then we get 380 for most sellers, 307 for the buyers, 375. Someone is being really aggressive here, trying to get rid of that Dominix for that premium. I basically have an extra one here, and I happened to drop by, so we're dropping this one. But this is another chart that was like straight up very, very good chip. You can also see the volumes. It took like 75 of them in 2 days, way more than the MR ships, to move the price up to this new high point. Then volumes go down, so a lot harder to get those Dominix, of course, at these price ranges. But this is one that has its uses in everything. It's so versatile that you can use it for level 4 missions, you can use it in PvP, you can use it as a spider tank, you could take it really anywhere, and it is going to get the job done. So that's pretty cool, a bit more consistent on the volumes, but still paying a nice premium. But the local ones seem to be a little bit less expensive than the MR ones so far. Next up here we get the Hyperion, that is also shooting up, almost 450 million for the sellers, 300 million for the buyers. This one is, I think, a little bit more expensive to build at the moment. And then the Megatron is probably one of the most affordable. No, the Dominix, you know, that high usage does come with more affordability. Megatron going to 385 for the sellers, and a complete lack of availability. So there is a bit of this rush on creating Dominixes, which I think is creating an opportunity. If you happen to still have a Hyperion landing, hanging around, you could get a very good price for that. Same with the MR ships, and then we'll quickly take a look at the ranges. 350 for the Raven. Again, a Raven popular level 4 mission, definitely something that's used often in PvE. And here the damage is a little bit more under control by a little bit more supply. We're still below 350 for the Raven. Rogdo 420, Scorpion 420, right? Who would think that a Scorpion would cost that much more than a Raven? That's kind of crazy, but that's the case because of the lack of availability. And then finally we get the Minmatar ones. Well, we've got the Maelstrom, Trite 410, someone is coming in really aggressively, and this really does show the smaller market size of Dodixie here. You're not selling Maelstroms every single day. There's 2 of them available on the market. The Tempest has gone up to 355, that's quite doable, and then the Typhoon actually at 340, that is very nice, actually decent, I would say, in range as well. So this really becomes a very different dynamic, I would say, between availability but also popularity of the ships, creating this pretty big difference with the MR ones really standing out for being super expensive. And then I'm quickly going to mention this one, because you know, everyone is now looking at these super expensive battleships. Here is the Praxis price, 236 million, 150 for the buyers. There's not that many on the market anymore, and it's already at a 1-year high point as well. So the Praxis is still now a cheap option. If you don't have a battleship but you want one, I would say go and buy your Praxis right now, so that you have that option available. I would definitely not want to not have a Praxis somewhere in New Eden at the moment, because eventually I do think we're going to dry up, and this is going to start to really go up in price and basically become competitive with the other battleships as well. Because I mean, a Praxis, it's comparable to a Raven, it's comparable to a Dominix, and these are that much more expensive that eventually I think the price will go up for the Praxis as well. I'll take a quick look at the advanced battleships markets, especially the Marauders here, but as I said, this is a much smaller market, so I do think things will be a little bit janky, right? 2 Paladins available on the market, 2.5 and 2.3 billion, 1.6 for the buyers. Let's take a look at my new level 4 mission runner, 2.3 billion almost for these sellers, definitely at a high point. So here is that Golem rebalancing that has really, the Marauder rebalancing that has really made them far more popular, and we're paying a pretty big premium for that one. Kronos going for 2 billion. I mean, honestly, it's not a bad ship. It requires a bit more activity if you're using it in missions, but its DPS potential is very high. And then the Vargar is pretty good as well at 2.2 billion, and so this has been basically dragging a lot of those Tech 2 materials in as well. As we have increasing popularity. That's also quite noticeable. Let's maybe take a quick look here at the Golem. So you can see here the bigger gaps in the volumes that were happening first part of the year, and then here at the tail end we definitely have that rush in, and then I would say it's a bit more consistent here, and that we're trading Golems almost every single day at this point. So I'd say volumes are up, not dramatically. Obviously you can't really have dramatic increases with like half a dozen ships or just 2 ships on the market, but it's noticeable that I think they are moving products a little bit more quickly, so they require more production, which is more materials, and thus that upwards pressure is starting to show up, I think, in other Tech 2 ships as well. So that's interesting. All of this now is really, I think, gonna rebalance the situation with small ships, frigates, destroyers, cruisers becoming quite cheap, affordable, basically the stuff that if you lose it, you don't mind too much. And then once you get into battle cruisers, battleships, yeah, that's gonna be your real commitment. If you want to get into a battleship, $500 million for an MR battleship, take one. That's way more of a commitment all of a sudden. And then of course, once you go into the final category, capital, super capitals, that's where you get crazy prices, and you basically need a group supporting you to produce these, to get everything together, and then you don't want to lose those, I don't think, so you're gonna be quite a little bit more careful all of a sudden. So that's, I think, how all of this stuff is going to evolve. What I would say is very noticeable for Dodixie is that the smaller size does mean a little bit more volatility and a little bit more responsiveness to changes. So this is, to me, is very noticeable here. Titanium went down to 5 ISK, did go up a little bit on the rush, on the volume rush, but is staying at 6.5, not reaching that 7 ISK mark, which Jita and Amar, I think, have managed to do. And so that's actually pretty impressive. I would say this is more predictive of what I would expect. You would expect Titanium to jump up a little bit, but be careful there, because eventually demand is going to be lower for this mineral, and so you should have lower prices. And then on the other hand, you've got Pyrite, which has actually gone for a premium. Even Noxium is still going for a premium. And then we're going to take a quick look at this. This is what I find kind of interesting as well. I took a sneak peek before actually recording the video. Here is the Plex chart with a very clear bottom being formed at this range as well of 2.2 million. But now we're already selling at almost 2.5 million. Buyers are at almost 2.3 million for Plex Ingit. I'll take a quick look at what's happening around here, but we have the I Choose You market, but it's pretty much the same. It's almost 2.5 million for a Plex here. Smaller volumes, smaller availability, more responsiveness. I'm going to, I think, drop by Dodixie a little bit more often and see if it does indeed have a little bit of like a predictive aspect to it, which I think I'm reading that here. Basically in Jita doing Eve talk, it's still like, all right, I think the market is wanting to go away from deflation, lower price, wanting to form a bottom, but I'm not sure. Here in Dodixie, it's very pronounced. We're clearly going back up towards the 2.5 million for those sellers. They're saying we gotta get to those higher prices. And so that is something that is going to be interesting to see if in the upcoming weeks Jita will also reach 2.5 million. That could make it quite an interesting market to keep an eye on, and then to see how the others will respond to what's happening in Dodixie, as it's only 15 jumps away from Jita, which is quite doable for a trade cycle as well, for instance. So that's kind of interesting. That quick extra note here for Plex at the tail end, showing a real bottom and actually aggressive sellers heading towards 2.5 million, way up here on the chart already in Dodixie, which is a little bit faster, I would say, than the Jita market. And yeah, there you go, guys. I think we'll end the video on that. This is my look at the market in Dodixie. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.